असं इथला आवाज येतोय का? हॅलो. हा
हो आवाज येतोय. पार्टिसिपेंट इधर नाम होते ही हैं, करो बस आईडी।
बस एक बार थोड़ा वेट करे, कुछ स्लो चल रहा है ना।
अच्छा ये पार्टिसिपेंट नाम आ रहा। हाँ ये पार्टिसिपेंट है ये सब।
आपकी आवाज तो जा रही होगी, उधर सारे अनम्यूटेड हैं।
अच्छा
वीडियो भी बनते हैं कोई, अगर
काफी लोग जुड़ी है।
ये कलर है नीचे वाला।
अनम्यूट के
हॅलो विनय, हॅलो विनय, विनय,
हॅलो,
हा येतोय का आवाज माझा आता?
तुम्ही दुसऱ्या लॅपटॉपवर गेला का?
हा निसार सरांच्या लॅपटॉपवर आहे मी, तिथून हे करतो तिथून.
हा तिथून येतोय आवाज, ठीक आहे.
हा ठीक आहे, सरांना पाठवून द्या, निसार सरांना इकडे.
हो, गेले गेले ते
गेले, ठीक आहे.
कनेक्ट नहीं हो पा रहा है, वेबिनार शुरू नहीं हो पा रहा है।
हॅलो,
हा विनय बोला ना.
पीपीटी हे केली का?
पीपीटी मिनिमाइज केलेली आहे. 1-2 मिनिटात माझी इंट्रोडक्शन झाली की मी हे करतो.
ठीक आहे.
हा वो बोला सर, प्लीज कम.
बाबूजी आए नहीं आए हो? हाँ?
Yeah, please take your seat. बाळ हे व्हिडिओ कसा दिसणार आहे जरा हे करते का? हे व्हिडिओ आणि ऑडिओ दोन्ही दिसलं पाहिजे. सर इकडे बसा.
व्हिडिओ स्टार्ट झाला, ऑडिओ पण स्टार्ट आहे.
चालेल सर, तुम्ही इथंच बसून करा, फक्त मी जस्ट इंट्रोडक्शन केले की
चालेल.
ओव्हर.
स्टॉप केलं मी शेअरिंग, ते नंतर ऑन करते परत, म्हणजे मग व्हिडिओ दिसेल.
ओके चालेल काय.
हां
लावून ठेवलेलं बरं. Good morning one and all. Rayat Shikshan Samstha's Dhananjay Gadgil College of Commerce organized an international webinar on second language acquisition research and insights for English language teaching. So on this particular theme, there was vast of discussion and many people have presented their inputs regarding this particular topic. However, our principal has motivated us to organize a international webinar on this particular theme to give all the teachers of English a vast exposure for getting some of the basic as well as some minute details of that particular aspect. So on this occasion, I cordially welcome today's chief guest, Dr. Nisar Shaikh sir, and I would like to welcome principal of our college, Dr. Pratibha S ma'am, who is also the joint secretary of Rayat Shikshan Samstha. At the same time, I would like to welcome Dr. Yelen Ghatge sir, who is the vice principal of our college and who is looking after all the administrative work. At the same time, I would like to welcome all the participants who have participated in this particular webinar. At the outset, I would like to introduce today's chief guest, Dr. Nisar Shaikh sir, who is affiliated to Sihan University, Iraq. He teaches courses in English language teaching to the undergraduate students, as well as he supervises the research projects in the applied linguistics as well as English language teaching of the postgraduate students. He is from the land of Satara. He has pioneered the Satara Education Society's Language Institute and Research Center, LIRC. So before leaving India, he has started his work for the English teachers through this particular institute. He also works as a resource to the Cambridge University Press. He undertakes teacher training programs in various institutes in India as well as abroad. In 2016, Dr. Sheikh have been awarded with scholarship by American Embassy. So it's a great privilege to have such a great and learned resource with us. He is a resource to the different webinars in English language teaching. He works in the advisory board of the entire Maharashtra English Language Teachers Association. So such an eminent resource person is with us. So I cordially welcome on behalf of our college, on behalf of our principal, and on behalf of all the participants. Now I would like to invite Dr. Nisar Shaikh sir to start his presentation on the topic Second Language Acquisition Research and Insights for the Effective English Language Teaching. Please, Nisar Shaikh sir.
Very good morning to all of you. I am really pleased to be here in Raya Shikshan Sanstha's reputed institute, Dhananjay Rao Gadge College of Commerce. And I'm really thankful to Dr. Gaikwad ma'am, the Vice Secretary, Joint Secretary of Raya Shikshan Sanstha and Principal of Dhananjay Rao Gadge College of Commerce, for inviting me here to present the seminar. I'm really also thankful that for last 15 to 20 days, I've been in touch with Dr. Ganesh Jadhav sir, who has been consistently taking the progress that I have been doing related to this topic and whatever preparation I was doing with. Another important thing is that presenting in Raya Shikshan Sanstha's any institute is a great privilege. And I feel it something very close to my heart and very close to whatever, that a success that I could have. Because I'm being a student of, I was a student of Shivaji College, Satara, English department. In the year 1994-1995, I was the student of MA. And right now, I just want to discuss this topic with you. I hope that some of the things will be made more clear with the discussion and the questions from the participant side. And right now, I just want to tell you in the beginning of the webinar, that second language acquisition research and insights for effective language teaching, English language teaching, why is this topic that I have chosen? What's the reason behind choosing this topic? You know that around the world, second language acquisition research is in boom. It's new area, and many disciplines have been connected, and it's interdisciplinary study and has given new rise in the world today. It has its roots in psychology, sociology, then ethnography, linguistics. So these are the main areas, main streams where from this stream of English language study, applied linguistics, study of applied linguistics has been raised. Second language acquisition research and effective English language teaching. What's the relation? First of all, I want to focus on effective English language teaching is related with pedagogy, whereas second language acquisition research is related to the the research that has been done for last around 50 years. It has started in 1960, but developed really in 2000 and onwards. But this is very essential area now that has been contributed a lot in English. Whenever we talk about English as a world language, teaching English as a foreign language, teaching English as a second language. So this research is very important. Now, most of the times what happens is that we have teachers' guide to give ideas to the teachers, to give some guidelines to the teachers that how teachers have to teach language, English as a second language or English as a foreign language. These guidelines are developed by syllabus designers, pedagogues, senior teachers. They prepare these guidelines. And these guidelines generally are, they focus on what is the content and how that content is to be delivered so that best learning of the students can take place. But this particular aspect, this particular topic that I have chosen here deals with the background which is in the research. The pedagogy is here supported by the research. The guidelines for the teachers are taken from the second language acquisition research. Second language acquisition research is a research that now gives inputs to or insights to the teaching of English around the world. Here, I begin this webinar with the aim to discuss second language acquisition research and to overview the insights for effective English language teaching. This is my aim here to present the webinar. Now I go to my slides. The slide number 1 here. This particular webinar or the topic I have divided in 3 parts. The first part deals with language acquisition and some related concepts with that. Second part deals with the insights from second language acquisition research. Henceforth, I would refer this second language acquisition research a broad term, and I'll make it short as SLA, second language acquisition, as SLA research. The second part deals with insights from SLA research. And the third part is related to implementing the insights for effective English language teaching. Now here, in the first part, here is first language acquisition. I just want to give you some ideas about the major concepts, the main themes, or we can say that key terms that are necessary to be understood for making the clear what the as the webinar will progress, as from my side, the presentation will progress, that time step by step to go ahead and to have a link. So for that, I have here I have made beginning with these key terms. So first, language acquisition is the first thing, on the basis of which the philosophy of second language acquisition has developed. And the third is development of interlanguage as a system. So this first part I'll clear as something, as a basis for developing the concept and developing the ideas about how it contributes to effective English language teaching. Later, I will talk about the insights. I have taken here some of the insights which are based on the research done by the researchers, SLA researchers around the world, that is input and interaction. This is a kind of research. Then comprehension input, then explicit knowledge and implicit knowledge, instruction and learning. So these are the insights. And then I'll apply these insights in the part 3, where I'm going to implement how to implement these insights for effective English language teaching. Nowadays, you see that in English language teaching around the world, activities play very important role. Most of the syllabuses around the world are having activities as the content, exercises as the content, tasks as the content. So these are the content that nowadays teachers are dealing with, and students are learning English through the content. Now, the first thing that I want to deal with, this second language acquisition research. I just want to clear some related concepts to the topic. The first language. What does it mean by first language? The first language that one picks up during the critical period will generally be the person's first language. Now, first language, as we know, that most of the Maharashtrians have Marathi as their first language. First language is something that is learned before puberty, or that is critical period. In early age, whatever we learn, it relates to the first language. Whatever we get as input and whatever we produce as output is through first language. Now, first language plays a very important role in learning English as a second language or foreign language. That I'll talk about later. Here, I want to focus on first language acquisition. First language acquisition refers to the acquisition that is unconscious learning of one's native language. Languages in the case of bilinguals, sometimes what happens is that a learner may be a beginner of languages, many languages, one or more than one languages, bilingual or multilingual in the beginning itself. So these are the terms in English language teaching or second language acquisition research of this area. The terms are very flexible. So many linguists have defined them from their own perspectives. They have looked into the context and then they have defined those terms. I'd like to tell here that Chomsky, when he talks about language, cognitive linguistics, when he is dealing with and when he's putting his research in that area, he states that in his writings we find that he is focusing on the model, the first language or the mother tongue. The speakers of the mother tongue are the models for learning the language, because he thinks that the language exists in the first language learners, means the language or the system of language exists in the brain of the first language learner, and which is, to some extent appropriate and adoptable. So this is what the view of Chomsky. I'm not going into the details of this. I just want to clear some terms before going further. Here, the second language acquisition. Second language acquisition is acquisition of any language which, which is other than language one. Now here, some of you will ask the question that, is English a second language or foreign language? So second language and foreign language, when we talk about, there is uh, one, one view of Rod Ellis, who takes the reference of the context and then talks about foreign language, English as a foreign language, and English as a second language, or foreign language or second language. Now here, when one learns the language, the particular language in the context where it is the language of the society at a large, is called learning second language. For example, if someone goes to London, England, or going to US, UK, Canada, or Australia, and if he or she is learning language, English language, then he is second language or she is second language learner, because he or she is learning in the context where English is the native language. And in that environment, if he or she is learning, then it is called learning English as a second language. Learning English as a foreign language, it's a kind of context that, that where we learn English. Outside of the classroom, there is no English, use of English. Take the condition of us, Indians, or the people, the students in Maharashtra, those who are learning English. They are learning English as a foreign language because outside of the class, they speak their mother tongue and not English. So that's why this is learning of English as a foreign language. But Rod Ellis states that the process of learning is same. Even the context is different, the process is same. Whatever goes on inside the brain of a learner, the process is the same. So he states that after first language, whatever language comes, maybe second, third, fourth, fifth, or whatever, or all can be counted as second languages. So this is what the clearance that is from Rod Ellis. And I also, I just follow him. I just agree with whatever this definition is made. Second language acquisition is acquisition. Second language acquisition refers to the learning of another language in a context in which the language is used as a means of wider communication. For example, the learning of English in United States and United Kingdom. Just now I explained everything. Second language acquisition research. Again, I refer here Rod Ellis because he is the very well-known second language acquisition researcher. And most of the theories, most of the practices that he has done around the world have been referred by many linguists nowadays, especially applied linguists, pedagogues. They refer Rod Ellis because his work is very, very renowned, and he's a pioneer of many theories and practices that he has explained very well, and with many evidences that he has proved the theories that he said. The second language acquisition research is sometimes mentioned as SLA or L2 acquisition, is related to the field of study, that is the body of research and theory that has investigated L2 acquisition. I'd like to focus here, before going to part 2, I am focusing here, what is acquisition and what does it mean? Acquisition is related to learning in a context. And you know that whenever we study the term acquisition, it is always compared with learning and acquisition. Learning is supposed to be, a conscious efforts by the teacher and the students inside the classroom to acquire, to learn the language. Now, what is acquisition? acquisition is taking place naturally. For example, mother tongue. When someone learns mother tongue, it is learned naturally in a natural environment. And you know that the exposure is a large. There is no need to, go for learning language as a system. The system of language, that is grammar, is automatically learned or acquired by the learner when acquisition takes place. But in case of learning, it doesn't happen. It has to be taught, it has to be learned, then it has to be consciously learned. Sometimes learning can be done subconsciously. We say that no need to teach grammar, but it's better to teach language directly. So in this context, we say that learning and acquisition, these are two separate things. But as far as, again, I go to Rod Ellis, who says that learning and acquisition, even again, is the same that happens in the brain of the learner. So he is not making difference between these two. Some linguists, some applied linguists have made difference in these two concepts, that is learning and acquisition. Some says that learning is artificial, whereas acquisition is natural. But these two are almost same. Now I turn to part number 2, where I go for the insights from research, SLA research, second language acquisition research. Input and interaction is the first concept, that our first idea, first research oriented a concept that we are taking into account here. Input and interaction. To happen the learning of, or to make learning to happen of English as a foreign language or second language, it's necessary to give an input to the learner, or learner should take an input. Input is the most important thing. Now, what does it mean by input? It is related to what is understood by the learner, whereas interaction deals with the learner's participation and understanding of language through interaction. Now, input, we can say it as input is related to teacher's instructions in the class. Whatever teacher gives us instructions to the learners to get their participation and to focus on an activity or the content that he's going to deal with. So whatever instructions teacher gives is an input to the learner. Then the materials or the course materials that the students are reading or listening to. The materials is also an input to the learner. And then students conversation in the class is an input. These are the 3 inputs to make learning of English successful in the class, or to give some kind of, that there is the need of the input. As you can say that, for example, reading and listening, these are the 2 activities. If the learners are involved in, they learn, they take the reading text or spoken text as an input. They process that input and then become ready to produce their output. So this is what the research-based idea, and the originator of that idea is Stephen Krashen from US, and who has developed, or who has put an idea of comprehensible input. In 1985, he has stated the idea of comprehensible input. What does it mean by comprehensible input? Comprehensible input is something which is understandable to the learner, interesting to learner to listen to or to read to. So that kind of input which gives challenges to the learner and triggers the learner's mind to work on the input. So this is called comprehensible input. Another most important personality from India who has worked as applied linguist as well as pedagogue, and his work is very, very well known all over the world. Sometimes he's called as pioneer of task-based language teaching or activity-based language teaching, is Dr. N.S. Prabhu, who has done Bangalore project, which is well known around the world. Prabhu developed tasks or task-based language teaching, methods of task-based language teaching, as well as the materials that he developed. Bangalore project is a very famous project around the world. Most of the researchers in UK and US they have taken references of the work of Dr. N.S. Prabhu. His Indian, his philosophy is very natural. It's rooted in Indian culture, but useful to the world as it is very naturalistic approach to language teaching. So he states that, Dr. N.S. Prabhu states that the input should be a challenge, a minimal challenge to the learner. What does it mean by minimal challenge? He says that it is a challenge where the student has to involve in the activity, has to work on whatever the problem, whatever the input given, whatever the content given, he has to work on that. And while doing that mental work, or while doing it as mental activity, he shouldn't feel it as too easy, that he shouldn't take any effort and he can come to the output. So in a very little efforts, in a very at ease that he can solve that and lead to the output, such a kind of input, such a kind of input is not called as a challenge for the learner. As well as it shouldn't be very much challenging that learners, even though takes lots of efforts, he couldn't reach the output. So the minimal challenge he suggests that should be at the level of the learners. So level of the learner is to be taken into account by the teacher, by the pedagogue, by the teacher is a pedagogue basically, that those who develop their idea, generate their ideas related to teaching based on the experiences, they become the pedagogues. So I refer here teacher and not pedagogue, that the teachers who are, well known with what is the level of the learner, how they can match their content with the learner's level is most important, level of language. So that is most important. So here I go to next concept, that is interaction modification hypothesis. I just talked about input, and I have taken two references of two applied linguists around the world. One is from US, whose name is Krashen, and second is Dr. N.S. Prabhu. Here I'm dealing with interaction modification. Interaction, it plays a very important role. Nowadays, not input is something you can say that input is either a text that is spoken by someone, that is one-sided communication, either, or it is written as a text or written text, which is again to be read by the learner, and this is again a one-sided communication. It's something that non-reciprocal, not reciprocal. When reciprocal task is there, reciprocal activity is there, there is the involvement of two, that is speaker and hearer, or writer and reader. So both of them, when they involve in the task of when they involve in the language task, it is called reciprocal task. So interaction, which is here, that the concept that has been, he in the beginning, he developed that concept along with the conversation that takes place between native speaker and non-native speaker. And native speaker's language is, of course, that it should be grammatically correct one. At the end, the aim of every learner or every activity of teaching of English in the class to the students is that the student should speak English accurately and fluently. So this is what the main aim of teaching English, accuracy and fluency. So these two things, if we take into account, then with whom we have to relate it, where from we get a model to learn. The model is usually being followed around the world is native speakers' language. So we are, or most of the theories have been framed by studying the native speakers' language. It doesn't mean that English has to be followed from UK people and US people, and that has to be a model for us. Not like that. Even Indian English has its own variety. It has been developed for a long time. Now, around 100, more than 100, more than 200, 300 years, our community is, in the contact with English. So this has become our variety, our indigenous English has been established here. So we are also making interaction here, but to some extent, we have to think about whether it is accurate or not. Students, whatever they generate as their dialogues or whatever they speak with other students or with the teachers, are they speaking it correctly or not? So that's most important thing. Unless and until language is spoken correctly, the level of speech gets kind of, it deteriorates or it comes down. It gets a kind of little value, or it's degraded always if it is grammatically wrong. So it's most important that we have to think about how language is to be learned grammatically correct, accurate, and fluent. Then here, Long says that there was a communication problem with speakers attempt to resolve. Negotiation of meaning takes place, which both would help learners to comprehend and to direct their attention, or to focus their attention to specific linguistic features. Long has developed tasks or kind of, some activities are there that I will discuss in the next part, that the third part, which is the application of all these concepts that I'm dealing with. So that time I'll discuss with you these insights, how they are applied there. So I'll especially talk about the interaction tasks, language interaction tasks. And then along with that, I'll discuss whatever the principles, whatever the ideas behind developing those tasks and how those tasks have to be taught in the classroom. Interaction is also has played a main role in communicative language teaching syllabuses. Now, the second point here, which I want to focus, is that comprehensible output. This idea by Svein, who is the applied linguist from US, and she has brought this idea as a opposite idea to Krashen's idea of concept, comprehensible input. She says that it's not only input, but also the output, that is production of language by the learners, that also plays an important part. So it would be, Krashen is very much strong in his opinion that input is the most important, and not speaking or writing, but listening and reading, and whatever input that the learners take from speaking and listening and reading, that is most important for them to develop their language. The processing inside the mind of the child, of the learner, happens because of these inputs. So according to Krashen, input is the most important thing in language learning, or it plays a very important role. Whereas Svein says that it's not only the input, but also output is important, because when language is produced, or when the learner is trying to produce language, he or she is actively involved in thinking what kind of words, what kind of sentences, what kind of orders, what kind of pronunciation, or all these things, that how he can or she can do it. About that, the active thinking, the consciously he thinks about or she thinks about it, and the learning happens. So here I just give you another concept that has derived, or insight that has been derived from second language acquisition research. Based on that, there is a concept of teaching explicit knowledge and implicit knowledge. These two are very important things. Nowadays, there is a boom, and many contradictory ideas are coming front, and we are familiar with that. Whether language is to be learned through the language as a grammar, or is it to be learned as a message, or is it to be learned without learning grammar? So explicit knowledge and implicit knowledge, what does it mean? Explicit knowledge is that knowledge which belongs to declarative memory, or which is stored in the declarative memory. It is related to the facts. It's the knowledge about the rules which learner applies, which learners are applying when they are understanding a message, as well as when they are producing the message. So if the learner is learning English by focusing on grammatical rules, then proponents of the grammar focused language teaching say that the learning of explicit knowledge, developing explicit knowledge of the learner is most important, whereas the other side is of implicit knowledge or implicit language teaching. Implicit knowledge is, a tacit knowledge or intuitional that comes just like first language, mother tongue. There is no need on the part of the learner to focus on the grammar, focus on the rules. Rather than that, it is learned automatically. It is learned, without focusing grammar and focusing meaning. If the message and its meaning is understood, it's enough. And the context of the text is enough for understanding the message. So these proponents of implicit learning, they say that there is no need of learning grammar. So this approach, excuse me, this approach has been widely accepted around the world. In India also, most of the syllabuses are framed to give the input to the learners, the message, the holistic approach, and not the explicit knowledge of the language. But there is again combination that we see that most of the English language syllabuses having combination, neither much focus on the implicit learning or nor on explicit learning. No much grammar, no much meaning focused language learning. So the balance has been achieved by some of the syllabus designers. But this is most important on the part of the teachers, that how to do these things. It's not so easy that just to talk about using mother tongue while teaching English, using Marathi while teaching English. It's very simple thing that most of the people say that it's good to use L1 while teaching L2. It's good to teach grammar than to teach only English. If the teacher is teaching thoroughly in English in the class, then people complain, that even parents complain, that why are you teaching just in English and not using Marathi? But large number of researchers, many researchers have, they have they have their idea that the second language, English, when it is learned as a second or foreign language, it is necessary on the part of the teacher to use English as much as possible. When to use L1, that is first language, it depends that what kind of situation is there in the class, what time, exactly at what moment of the task, at what moment of the activity, the teacher has to use mother tongue. So this is important. Otherwise, what happens is that learners become learners, most of the group activities, we see that learners, if they are not being monitored properly by the teacher, then they involve in using first language, and the task is completely, of no use. It's futile because learners are not using English as a medium or as something to conversate, to make conversation, to discuss. And that time, the group discussion task becomes futile. So in this case, that classroom observation is most important. What kind of participatory structure that you organize in the class is most important thing. If you are teaching to the whole class, then to what extent you have to use English in the class so that learning of English will become easy for them. Learning of English will become, a kind of really that what your objective is, that can be achieved. I go to next slide that is related to explicit learning and implicit learning. What happens on the part of learner when he or she involves in the tasks which are grammar-based tasks and which are meaning-focused tasks? So when explicit learning takes place, learner is a conscious and is attentive. It is intentional learning. Meaning-focused learning is incidental. It occurs as it is, as natural. But grammar-focused learning or explicit learning is intentional. Focus is always on the feature of language. Particular feature has been taken into account by the teacher. He plans that how that particular feature of language is to be taught. For example, if he's teaching descriptive passages, how to write descriptive passages, and if he's teaching or he or she teaching description of places, then what should be taught? Which particular feature of the grammar is to be focused? Then he has to bring to the notice of the learners the prepositions, which are mostly used when description of places are done. So these descriptions, when, for example, where is where, what is where, the arrangement of the room, the arrangement of the place, when learner has to talk about that, he has to use prepositions. Such tasks, when teaching and learning of such tasks happen in the class, there is focus on particular feature of learning, feature of language. Whereas here in the implicit learning, or you see that incidental learning, Dr. N.S. Prabhu is of this opinion that there should be focus on meaning and not on the form of language. And he has got a success in implementing that teaching method in South India, and he has done that project very successfully. Even I have developed some tasks of mine when I was doing my research for PhD. When I did my research that time, I came to know that some tasks that I used in the class were very useful than the structural language teaching or grammar-based language teaching. I used some of the tasks like non-stop speaking activity and speed reading activities in the class. So those activities, when I was conducting in the class, I found in the end that students got familiar with the features of language. For example, past tense, how to use the simple past, They became familiar with that, and automatically they started using past tense very perfectly at the aim. I was conducting some extensive reading program that I conducted for around 3 months for the students of 9th standard in Satara. And in that extensive reading program, I provided passages, small, very interesting passages I provided to the students. And in the beginning, I found that the students were taking a lot of time to read. Even a passage of about 300 words, they took half an hour to read, or more than that. And for giving answers to the questions based on that passage, they were taking time, a lot of time. But later, when they became familiar with that, every day when they were reading a passage of based on different themes and topics, they got familiar with. And even the slow learners, even the average learners became familiar with that. And they became fast readers. The speed was also increased. And the students who were reading 40 words or 50 words per minute, they started to read around 120 words, 130 words per minute. So that speed of reading was increased. Even I assessed their comprehension, ability of comprehension, was it increased or not? So even comprehension ability was improved. Not only the speed reading, but comprehension of the passage, reading passage, was also improved. So the meaning focused language teaching without teaching grammar or its feature sometimes helps a lot. So but I'm also of the opinion that if we just focus on meaning focused language teaching, it doesn't help sometimes, because the students are, struggling to use language correctly. And that time, focused teaching, form focused teaching is most important. Here I'm going to part 3, which is related to the instruction. Form focused language teaching that I talked about, and meaning focused I just talked about. So I come to part 3, where I'm dealing with the tasks. And these tasks I'll discuss with you along with some of my experiences that I've gathered throughout my through the teaching of around 24 years I've been teaching English. So throughout these years, whatever the experiments that I have done, whatever the tasks that I developed on my own for teaching writing skills, reading skills, speaking skills, and listening skills. Based on that, I'll share some of my experiences with you when I'll deal with this task. Now, form-focused language teaching. That is grammar-based language teaching. But this grammar-based language teaching has been changed now. Taking insights from second language acquisition research, the scenario of teaching grammar in the classroom nowadays has changed. Previously we were teaching rules and examples, and we were translating them in Marathi, in mother tongue. Rule was talked about, that subject, verb, object. Example was given. Many examples we used to give to the students. They were making rote learning of that, and then they were trying to produce their messages. But that kind of learning didn't help them, and they failed to produce English in the real life situations. They couldn't produce their own language, or they couldn't form their own message. And this we came to know as failure of grammar-based language teaching. But now the scenario has been changed. With the advent of, or with this research from SLA, some insights that we take from SLA and the tasks which have been developed around the world, we come to know that how this has been changed. Here I am discussing one task, discussion on teaching a sample task. This is sample of task form-focused language teaching. Here is coming, just a minute. Yeah. Just a moment, let's do it. Preposition of time. In this task, the feature of language is focused and the feature is preposition. So how it has been dealt with in the task. Here is one passage given and there are three activities that are, according to the phase. Sometimes the task is framed according to phases, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and connectivity has been brought into. This is a task developed by Rod Ellis. I'm taking his name again and again. I hope that, or I'm sure that you might have read book of Mr. Rod Ellis, Dr. Rod Ellis. Rod Ellis has developed so many theories, so many ideas, and he has given, he is the person who has taken references of how experimental teaching of English has been taken place. Whatever the ideas were generated around the world by different linguists, he has taken review of all that, and he has developed his theory of SLA, second language acquisition, in such a fantastic way that this has become, means the literature developed by Rod Ellis has become a very important, for every language researchers. This has become very important thing. And one of the book of Rod Ellis that I mentioned here is Task-Based Language Learning and Teaching. And that book, in that book, he has developed everything. There's all kinds of tasks, all philosophies developed around the world, how to develop tasks, then the types of tasks that he has dealt with in a very detailed manner. Then he has developed methodology of teaching task-based syllabus. Then he has developed another concept of that is testing language or assessing language of the students based on the tasks. So everything that he has given in that book, and that book is, that's very fantastic book. I just gave here you the one task. Underline here, underline the time expression in this passage. Now it will seem very easy for us, but when we will deal with the concepts related to that, how to teach that or how to look at the task, what insight is needed for the teacher to look at the task is is something complex. Most of the teachers think that it's a very easy. It's something that 5th standard student can do. But you know that most of the teachers around Maharashtra, I have seen that when I, even myself, I say that I cannot say here very strongly that I have been, succeeded in teaching English very well wherever I have worked as a English teacher. I want to tell you here that nowadays, whatever the teaching is, whatever teaching of English that is being seen on YouTube or online teaching that I'm just watching all the videos, and I come to know that the teachers are just translating, just making things simple for the learners. They are not thinking about how the language as a system to be developed in the minds of the students. How can they become proficient learners, proficient speakers of English? How can they develop step by step? How can their level of language will be heightened? That common European references, common European framework of references. If you think about that common European framework of references, you will come to know that they have given 6 levels of learners: A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, and C2. These are the 6 levels. That even most of our attempts and our teachers' attempts are failed to develop competencies, language competencies of the learners, even at the A1 level. because we don't think that how S and ES is added, how plurals have to be made. We know it very well that S and ES when to add it. But you know that getting it fit into the mind of the learner and to make him or her to use it automatically when he is speaking or writing, when subject and verb comes together, when how to make the concord of that, it's very difficult that to get it fit into the mind, to automatize the language. So for that, what kinds of efforts teachers are doing, they are less. Getting those forms fixed into the mind of the learners, automatize that those forms, then whenever the expression is made by the learner, how natural, how just like first language speaking, how can he speak English as a second language or foreign language? Even most of the teachers are not focusing on at least intelligible pronunciation. This is very important. I noticed that some of the teachers are, taking their mishabits from L1 and transferring them to L2. And when they say the connectors, they enlarge the voice, enlarge that connector by making, they make a tone like and, but, like that. This is happening, naturally, and this is happening, they are not conscious about how learners have to be taught and how we should create a kind of environment for them as much natural as possible. How can we adopt good ways of speaking and writing in English? How can we set ourselves as a model before the learners? Because they don't have a pure model, but at least good English, at least understandable, intelligible English, how to develop that kind of English of the learners, the teachers are not taking care of that. So here I have just one simple task, but even though this seems to be simple, the idea behind on which the teacher has to think about, I'm expecting here that the teachers will think about it, that what's the background behind this. So here I read the task. Underline the time expressions in this passage. Preposition of time, underline the time expressions in this passage. I am reading it loudly and then I'll go ahead. I made an appointment to see Mr. Bean at 3 o'clock on Tuesday, 11th February, to discuss my application for a job. Unfortunately, he was involved in a car accident in the morning and rang to cancel the appointment. I made another appointment to see him at 10 o'clock on Friday, 21st February. However, when I got to his office, his secretary told me his wife had died at 2 o'clock in the night and that he was not coming into the office that day. She suggested I rescheduled for some time in March. So I made a third appointment to see Mr. Bean at 1 o'clock on Monday, 10th March. This time, I actually got to see him. However, he informed me that they have now filled all the vacancies. And suggested I contact him again in 1998. I assured him that he would not be seeing me in either this or the next century. Now, this is a passage, but how the task is developed here. First thing is that students have to underline the prepositions which are used in the passage. This is the ability to identify the language form used in the passage. The second activity here is write the time. Write the time, that is at, in, and on. So when we use at, when we use in, and when we use on. Especially for, we use at for stating time, like 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 1 a.m., 3 p.m., like that. In is for, for year, stating an year in 2020. On is generally used for stating day. So this is very simple something. But to get it fit into the minds of the learners, it's very difficult. Most of the graduate students also not able to put appropriate preposition in front of the time-related noun or time-related adverb. Make up a rule. Third one is make up a rule, explain when to use at, in, and on in the time expressions. So here, the last activity is that students in the third activity, at the third phase, they are getting involved in making the rules. Students have not been just taught the rules, but they have been given a sample. It's best to give an example to them. A message, a kind of message or kind of text is to be there. And then through the text, the learning happens very well. But this is a focused task. Make up a rule to explain when to use at, in, and on. So this is the last activity. Now here I want to take attention of all of you on consciousness raising tasks. This type of task that I have just discussed is consciousness raising tasks. Consists of data consisting exemplars of the target feature. Now data, why the term has been used as data? Because it is input that is related with this. All these things are related to cognitive psychology. So the concept of second language acquisition has come from cognitive psychology. So from that perspective, if we think brain just like a computer, which we give input to and get output. So from that perspective, if you think about, and of course the processing happens in the brain of a man, language processing happens. That leveled is another linguist, cognitive linguist, who has given the model of learning, in which he has stated that three important processes happen when learning of language takes place. The first is conceptualization, where the ideas which are scattered around in the mind are gathered, the student is, or the learner is trying to gather those ideas. And then formation, where the ideas have been put into the message, or according to the rules of grammar, according to lexis, according to order of sentences, the ideas have been put together. And finally, articulation. So articulation is something producing language, either in written form or in oral form. So these three processes takes place in the mind of learner. So learning a language happens according to that. This is psycholinguistics, or this is something, the cognitive process that takes place in the learner's mind, which has to be taken into account. So data consisting exemplars of the target feature. Instructions requiring learners, second is instructions requiring learners to operate the data in some ways. Now, data, there are options, data options. Now, this is again to be thought about, that teachers have to focus here on what happens exactly when the learner learns the language and whatever input we give to the learners. So this is very important for the teachers to think about what happens exactly, what kind of input we give. So here, the data option, it is contrived, written, continuous text, well-formed as opposed to deviant and non-gap. Now these 5 terms have to be understood in detail when we are dealing with such tasks. Contrived data and authentic material, authentic data. Now, what is content? Content is either authentic or contrived. Authentic is something which is very natural, which occurs in the context where, Cambridge University has its large corpus, and they have developed corpus for so many years that they have stored that corpus, and based on the corpus, they have developed their materials, which they are using for teaching. So around the world, when they provide to different countries their materials, that time the materials that they have gathered, it is based on the corpus that they have collected for a long time. So that corpus has been studied well. So what kind of discourse is to be set, what kind of text is to be set as a content in the syllabus depends on corpus-based approach to design syllabus or to develop the content for learning. Contrived is something that is not natural, that is artificial. Something like dialogues, that when we frame dialogues, they are contrived. They are not natural. Especially when we put it in the text, they are not original, where hesitations or turn taking may be there, but the hesitations and kind of pauses and the kind of the expressions used specifically in the natural language, that won't occur in such kind of data. That is called contrived data. That data is to some extent very good for teaching and learning. That is used around the world in the materials, in the teaching in English language teaching materials. But that's very useful too, because but it's not faulty data. It's not again that natural data. Sometimes I couldn't say here that I can't say here I can't say here that it's a natural data. I can't say here that it's a false data, even because that data is very useful. Even though it's not natural, it's something as something correct one, grammatically correct one, but it is not natural. So that learners, whatever data we give them, how it helps to the learners is most important. Most of the yes, there is raising of hand from Rutika ma'am. Hello. Hello. Yeah, I just want to I just complete this task and then I'll finish it, and then we'll discuss about. If you have any question, you can ask me questions once I finish it, and then we'll discuss about. So written, this particular text was written. This is continuous text. Then well-formed, these terms are very simple for you to understand. And then non-gap, gap and non-gap. This is again very important. There are three kinds of gaps in tasks or the activities. That is opinion gap, information gap, and reasoning gap. These three kinds of gaps are there. But here there is no gap. This learners, when there is a gap in the data or in the content, that time learners have to think on their own to fill up that gap. And that by gap filling, they learn that what is information that they have to add there. So that is gap. There are three kinds of gaps that generally we find in a task development whenever the materials for task has been developed. And the final operations involved in the task. It is identifying the first operation. Operation means the learner, whatever activity he is doing, whatever he is, how his mind operates on the task, on the data. That is, first is identifying. He has to underline the prepositions used in the text. Then sorting, where he has to exactly notify that which are the prepositions. And then finally verbalizing the rule. So verbalizing the rules is the third activity here. So this is what the form focused language teaching. And then there is meaning focused language teaching, whereas the special meaning is prime. That message is given. Here I just gave you, I just show you here task, which is meaning focused one, in which one message is there, text is there, text 2 is there. And I come directly to last one here. Based on those 3 texts, it has been asked here to the learner to develop information cards. And in the 3 texts here, I have taken here the prime ministers of different, president of America is here, in the information about president of America is here in the first text. In the second text here is the information about our prime minister, Narendra Modi. And the third is Xi Jinping, who is the China's prime minister. So information about them has been given here, and the task based on that, that is note making, that is based on understanding meaning of the message, not focus on form, is here. And here the learners are asked to write the name. It is listen and note making, listen and note making, listening and note making. Here I'll read the text aloud, they listen to the text, and then they have been given this chart where they have to fill the information in the cards, that what is the name of the person to whom you listen to. Then place of birth, position, number of positions, then country, previous position, education, and university. This is information. If the learner is attentive on meaning, the main ideas that have been found there in the message, then the learner is able to write this or fill this card. This is meaning focused. And last one is interaction. This is interaction tasks, which I have talked about, that asking for help is the function, language function. We know that notional and functional communicative syllabus is based on that. So working in pairs, here students are asked to develop, or the conversation has to be developed by them. And I'm just reading it fast here, and I finished with the last 2 slides. One student looks at card A, the other looks at card B, and practice the conversation. Here also that you will think that it's a very easy thing to deal with such kinds of tasks in the class. But from the perspective of getting an outcome of the learning in the form of learners' language as a accurate and fluent, especially accurate, that time we come to know that our teacher will struggle to get the students or to make the students to use English accurately along with these tasks, because tasks can be performed. You know that most of the students are just making copy of other students. If 2 or 3 students are very good at English, then they have been followed and they have been copied. And even the teacher is not monitoring sometimes the classroom very well, and not using or not using the talent of the advanced learners for making the class, or for cooperative learning, to create a cooperative learning in the class. The teacher is not taking enough efforts. So most of the times, only 3 or 4 learners who are the advanced learners or good at English, they can learn well, but the other learners, they just make copy of, and they finish the task and go away. So their learning doesn't happen in the class. So teacher is to be very, very a kind of a good trainer. If he wants to teach English as any language in the class, I mean to say that he must be a good trainer. He should know that the role of the facilitator, because it's not just, giving lecture, or it's not just, that understanding. If it happens on the part of few students, then the work of the teacher is over, duty of the teacher is over. It's not like that. That from the, it's a very good opportunity for the teacher as well to study how English language teaching and learning takes place in the class. Every day for a language teacher, or every class for a language teacher, every lesson for a language teacher and activity for a language teacher is a kind of experiment from which a language teacher learns a lot. It's not just students learning, but it's also learning of the teacher. So here I just put here one task before you. Card A and card B is there. Here you want your friend to help you with some homework, and card B is for another student. Your friend wants you to help him or her with homework. You are not keen to. Yes, another student should give positive response, or sometimes or maybe he is not willing to help. So check if B is busy, then A has to give response to. Then again, ask him, her to help you. Try to persuade him or her. Tell him or her you are not doing anything. That's you are free. Refuse and give a reason, and then agree reluctantly and then thanking. This is what happening as a turn, that these are the turns between the two learners, and we have to organize this kind of activity in the class. We organize these kinds of activities in the class. Some students come in front of the class and they play roles, but what happens is that the language, is it really learned properly? What kinds of difficulties, what kinds of problems that occur to the learners when they use the language? How do they use the language? Do we observe that whether the language is accurate, fluent, and complex? To what level they are? Whether they are in elementary level learners, or intermediate level learners, or advanced level learners. And these kinds of activities, when we are conducting in the class, we conduct 3-4 activities with group of 3 or 4 groups of students. We become happy with that, and then the learning, that the experience that we take is also short. Is we are not also getting benefit as a teachers of language, because we are not getting familiar with what exactly happened. The process of learning, how does it happen? We are not getting a kind of knowledge as teachers, because teachers of language, they should become always, they should keep their knowledge always updated. If they have to deal with another task, if they have to deal with another activity in the class. So every day is, for a teacher, for a language teacher, is most important. Here, the discussion that I want to make is the first in this activity, which I have given here, just talked about. Here, negotiation of meaning is most important, and this term has been invented. This term has been coined by Long, that I talked before. Negotiation of meaning is most important thing, that learners have to be involved in negotiation of meaning. If they talk and go, if they play their roles and go, it doesn't help them. And even our observation as teachers also is insufficient. We cannot build any theories, or we cannot build any good exercises in future for our teaching of English. We cannot do that unless we note these things. So this is background, something which has been derived as insights from second language acquisition research. Here, I have developed this task as negotiation of meaning. How does it take place? How does it take place? Average learner, advanced learner. I haven't taken here A and B. Rather than that, I have mentioned here average learner and advanced learner. In the class, if you find the learners, as teachers, we know that who are the active and who are good at English and who are average learners. So if we come to know about the background of language, then how to utilize that background for making their learning to happen. So here, average learner asking the student that, are you free? Are you busy? Are you busy? Then advanced learner is saying, no, I'm not occupied. No, I'm not occupied. No, occupied is a word used here, which is here. Average learner is saying, what? Occupied? Then advanced learner is saying, I'm not busy, I'm fine. Then the average is saying, yes. Then advanced learner says, are you occupied? Yes, I occupy. What do you occupy? What do you occupy? Any place? Or are you occupied with any work? I'm occupied with homework. I'm occupied my homework. Then again, advanced learner is asking, okay, you are occupied with your homework. Yes. So what is here? Trigger, indicator, response, and reaction to response. The trigger is given by the advanced learner by using the word unknown to the average learner. So that is a trigger, a word which is unknown. So because of that indicator, what it indicates that average learner is giving indicator. For example, what? Occupied? This is kind of misunderstanding. He doesn't know that word or she doesn't know that word. That's why the question is what? Occupied? And then response is there. I'm not busy. I'm free. Then yes, average learner is saying yes. Now, simplification has been made here by the advanced learner, and that helped the average learner to get the meaning of word occupy. And this is what in applied linguistics or in SLA research, what these researchers have talked about it, how what terms they have used for discussing these kinds of tasks and whatever the outputs they get, how they analyze the tasks of that kind. Generally, what happens is that this kind of conversation has to be analyzed along with the native speakers and non-native speakers learners. But we may have availability of getting a native speaker into contact, but here we have non-native speakers and non-native speaker. One student is non-native, another student is also non-native. If this is happening, but amongst them, if one is advanced learner, then the knowledge of language of that advanced learner is to be utilized in the class. So here occupied is what it is called comprehension check. Here the advanced learner wants whether the average learner has comprehended the word used by him or not. And here clarification request. The average learner is making a clarification request by asking question what? Occupied? He wants clarification or she wants clarification from advanced learner. And then advanced learner is simplifying. This is the strategy. Simplifying is a strategy used. It's a kind of negotiation strategy. Generally, when conversation takes place, such kinds of negotiation strategies we use. Unless and until we train our students to learn communicative strategies, negotiation strategies, the learners never ever become proficient learners of English. Their English language development won't take place unless we are training them how to utilize strategies well. Because we are teaching at college level and most students are adult. So for teaching to adults, as their puberty period is over, so natural learning it's not possible to happen natural learning of English with them. So they have to depend on strategic learning. And strategies are most useful for them if they are using communicative strategies, negotiation strategies. Then step by step, using those strategies, they become familiar with using correct English. And that helps them a lot. So fourth is confirmation check. Here is a confirmation check. Are you occupied? Advanced learner is again asking, are you occupied? Yes, I occupy. Again, mistake has been done here. I occupy. Again, advanced learner is doing one thing, that is recast. This is here, fifth number strategy that is used by advanced learner is recast. What do you occupy? Any place? Or are you occupied with any work? So this is correcting, taking place by, happening by the advanced learner. So this kind of activity, if we conduct in the class and make cooperative learning, language learning, if we use them, how learners have them, and how teacher can monitor the task that is happening in the class. So this is not so simple that language learner, language teacher especially, they must have so many things with them, not just giving an input in the class, or not just carrying content from the textbook and pouring it down in the classroom, but they should adapt, that they should modify the content as well. It's not only what is there given in the book has to be taught as it is in the class. Rather than that, they have to adapt it. Adaptation by teacher means, making it contextualized, to get it fit into context, that what learners background is, what kind of, the environment, engaging environment that teacher has to create in the class for language learning depend on all these factors. Teacher can adopt the language materials that has been given in the course books, textbooks, and he can or she can use it very well in the class. So teacher has to develop himself to some extent as, redesigning of some tasks, or he or she should be able to develop materials of his or her own. That's most important thing. And another thing is that not only the materials developer, but teacher must be a good researcher as well. That it's not enough now to just complete the degrees of education as MA in English, MPhil in English, PhD in English, or whatever, or BEd, MA BEd in English, MA BEd with English. So these are the just qualifications, won't come to help of the teachers. In the world around, the teachers of language nowadays, especially the native speakers of English and near native speakers of English, those who are getting their degrees in UK and US, what they are doing is that they are, making their MSc in TESOL, MA in teaching English as a foreign language, MA in applied linguistics, and they are completing these kinds of courses where they get a lot of ideas and knowledge and practices of how to teach English around the world. So it's a very, a challenging field nowadays. It's not enough now just to read the things at home from the course book and go to the class and teach it as it is, or whether learning happens or doesn't happen. We are not, we don't care about such kind of approach will definitely, make a loss on the part of the teachers, on the part of the students as well. So here are some other concepts, but I just finish my presentation here. I hope that I have just discussed the three parts. The part one is related to language acquisition. Part two related to the insights that have been taken from SLA research and application of these insights when teaching of English has to happen effective in the classroom. This is what my presentation. I'm really thankful to all of you for listening to me very calmly and quietly. And if any question or doubts are there from you, just please go ahead and I'll discuss on that. Stop share. Now, if you have any questions or doubts, please, uh, I'm, I'm just happy here. I'm really happy. I'll appreciate if you ask questions or doubts about. It will help me even some ideas are coming from your side. Speaker. Doubt is there. I'm not able to listen to you, sir. Audio.
Hello.
Yes.
Is there anybody who is having any doubt or query regarding this topic? Okay. Now, hello. Participants are requested to ask the questions. Hello.
Yes.
Participants are requested to ask the questions. Hello. Sheikh sir, Nisar
Yes,
Sheikh
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Is there anybody who is asking the question?
Yeah, there is one question which is actually here texted. I just read it a little bit. The particular strategies to be a fluent English speaker, and how should the teacher the competence of foreign
Okay,
language
okay.
speaking?
Just after your explanation of the query,
Yeah,
principal madam will make the concluding remarks.
yeah. But one question is there,
हाँ,
Dr. Jadhav sir. There
हाँ
is one
बोलिए.
question that it's related to strategies that are useful for enhancing fluency of the learner, English language fluency of the learner.
Okay.
Should I give the answer to this question?
Yeah, sure, sure. You are free.
Yeah. So it's a very good question, very nice one that most of the times we find that our learners are not fluency in English. They hesitate a lot. Kind of, anxiety. Psychologically speaking, this is an anxiety that when anxiety is higher, the fluency is lower. From research perspective, then when the anxiety of the learner is higher, then the fluency in language speaking is lower. And when the anxiety is at the lower, then the speaking fluency is higher. But how to develop this? I here would suggest you a good book for enhancing fluency or task for enhancing fluency. There is one task which is developed as 4-3-2 task. 4-3-2 task. The title of the task itself is that 4-3-2 activity. Now, what does it mean? Kind of activity. For example, I've conducted that activity in the class. I gave one story to the students, and that story was circulated among different stories, not one story, but I circulated stories among students in the class. Stories were about 800 or 900 words. And there were around 30 students in the class. Those students belonged to standard 10. And that time, I gave them the task that whatever they will receive from the story, whatever ideas, whatever theme, whatever summary that they will gather or they will understand from the story, comprehend from the story, they have to talk about that in 4 minutes first, then in 3 minutes second, then in 2 minutes last. So what happened is that when they presented that story or their ideas about the story in the 4 minutes of time, they was relaxed. They was not speaking fast. Later, when they were asked to finish the same task in 3 minutes of time, they raised their speed, developed their speed. And when it came down to 2 minutes, when the minutes were made limited, minimum, their speed of speaking heightened. So this kind of task helps the learners well. And don't worry about when you are focusing fluency, don't worry about accuracy of the students, because our students won't be accurate when they are asked to speak fast. So that time we have to give relaxation in the beginning phase, but later on you have to make their production check. Means after 15 days of time, or the same task that you can utilize for some days, you shouldn't use it for one time and then leave. You have to use that practice. You have to make that practice for some period, and then you will come to know that the fluency of the learners have been developed. This is one thing. Second thing is that I'd suggest to read book by John Holt, and his book is What Do You Do on Monday? In that book, he has given one good activity for speaking language fluently and accurately, that is non-stop speaking. Non-stop speaking is an activity. If we conduct it in the class, then it has one condition, that the learner has to stop speaking once he is involved in thinking. He shouldn't think. Whatever errors or whatever repetitions he's making or she's making, he or she shouldn't stop. Once he or she is taking a stop for a long time to think on, then the turn of the learner is over. The another learner will come and present. So non-stop speaking activity, if you give to the learner, then step by step, you will find that in a 1 month of time, the learners, their brain starts working, their mind starts processing on whatever they speak, and their fluency develops. There is one more activity that you can conduct, is called reading in chunks. That if you break a text into chunks, that chunks are information, the meaningful information, the collection of, if one sentence we have to break into chunks like that. I have been conducted my webinar today on second language acquisition. So I've been conducted my webinar today on second language acquisition. There are 4 chunks. One is related to time, one is related to theme or topic, one is related to person. So person, place, time, and the topic related things have been coming together in the form of chunks. If this reading in chunks we develop of the students, and we ask them to read aloud and read in chunks and read fast, then their fluency in English develops. Yes.
Hello, sir. I want to ask something, if I may.
Okay, please.
Sir, my name is Ramchandra. Am I audible?
Yeah. Yes.
First of all, I want to thank you. It was a fantastic session. It was useful and really informative.
Thank you.
I want to ask 2 questions. During your session, you made a reference to one book called Task-Based Language Teaching and Learning.
Yeah.
Could you please tell me the name of the author? I couldn't hear it clearly.
Rod Ellis.
Rod Ellis.
R-O-D.
Okay.
E-double-L-I-S.
Rod Ellis. Okay.
It is Oxford University Press publication.
Oxford. Okay. Thank you.
University Press publication. I'd suggest one thing also, that if you go online and if you download website called b-ok.org,
Pardon?
b-ok.org. If this website you are downloading, then on that you will have Z library, and you can take many books downloaded which are written by Rodelis as well as Long, then Catherine Doughty, and Selinker, and many linguists, many applied linguists around the world who have done their work, renowned work. Especially, you can learn how to develop materials for teaching English as a foreign language. You can get a lot of materials developed by well-known materials developer of the world, Dr. Brian Tomlinson. So he has he has organization also, that materials development organization, which is working in UK in Leeds University. He's working there. So if you just go to this website, you can get a lot of material there, and you can download so many books about teaching of English.
Sir, I couldn't get the website address. You said D, right?
Yeah,
In the
B
beginning.
for bat, B.
Okay, B.
Hyphen, dash, hyphen, okay.
Okay,
Okay.
right.
Yes, okay.
Okay.
org. Org.
Yeah. Got it, sir. Got it.
Yes.
So thank you very much. I would like to thank the organizers as well. That was a very useful session. Thank you.
Yeah, I thank you for appreciation. Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
appreciation.
Shaikh sir.
Hello.
Nisar
Yeah.
Shaikh sir.
Yes.
Are the queries over?
Yeah.
It's okay then. Now, may I request principal of our college, Principal Dr. Pratibha Gaikwad ma'am, to present her concluding remarks.
Very good afternoon to one and all. On behalf of Rayat Shikshan Sanstha, Dhananjay Gadgil College of Commerce, I offer my concluding remarks on a very well-organized academic activity, namely methodology of learning English language. I place on record, I place on record my high level of appreciation towards my colleague, IQAC coordinator and head Department of English, Honorable Dr. Ganesh Zadhav sir, my another colleague, Vice Principal of our college, Honorable Dr. Ellen Ghatge sir, and most importantly, a very enlightened research person of today's webinar, Honorable Dr. Nisar Shaikh sir. He has a wide experience not only in India but abroad, and you all might have experienced the manner in which he places the topic across the table. He is a very enlightened, enthusiastic young who has got a international exposure, due to which he can very masterly state the manner in which one can teach English in a very effective manner.
Thank you very much.
Teaching English, which is a foreign language for all of us, needs a particular type of skill, and this skill has to be imparted. It is always stated that in order to become a master, one should learn from a master. So my
Thank you. स्टॉप झालेलं नाही.